It had been years since Layla had heard from Tariq, the man she once loved. The wealthy Arab millionaire had vanished from her life with no explanation, leaving her heartbroken and confused. But now, out of nowhere, a letter arrived, bearing an invitation to his wedding. Tariq was getting married, and he wanted her to attend. But the invitation was not a simple one. It was his revenge. Layla had no idea what awaited her when she stepped into the grand hall. What had he been planning all this time? And why her? Layla sat in the small cafe in the bustling heart of Nairobi, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup absent-mindedly. She had spent the last few years trying to forget Tariq, the man who had captured her heart and then shattered it without warning. He had been everything she had dreamed of, a charming, handsome man with deep, dark eyes that seemed to hold secrets of their own. When they had met in the vibrant streets of Cairo, it had felt like fate. Their connection had been instant, a love story that seemed destined to last. But then, without a word, Tariq had disappeared. His phone had gone silent, and his once frequent messages had stopped coming. Layla had been left with nothing but memories and unanswered questions. The silence had been deafening, and the pain of being abandoned by the man she had trusted had cut deeper than anything she had ever experienced. For months, she had searched for him, reaching out to his family and friends, but they too had been in the dark. Tariq had simply vanished. And then, as the months turned to years, Layla had slowly come to terms with the fact that she would never hear from him again. She had moved on, focusing on her career and rebuilding her life. But a part of her had never truly let go of the man who had once been her everything. And then, today, the letter arrived. It was unexpected and out of place in her otherwise calm life. The envelope was thick, made of high-quality paper, and stamped with a royal seal. Layla had stared at it for a moment, unsure of what to expect. There was no return address, only her name written in elegant script. She had opened it with trembling hands, half expecting it to be some form of scam or prank. But the contents inside took her by surprise. The letter was from Tariq. "Dear Layla," it began, "I know it has been a long time, and I owe you an explanation. For that, I am truly sorry. But I ask that you put aside whatever anger you feel and attend my wedding. You are, in fact, one of the most important people in my life, and I would be honored if you could join me in this special moment." Layla had read the words over and over, trying to make sense of them. Why was he inviting her to his wedding? And why now, after all this time? There was no mention of the past, no apology, no explanation for his sudden disappearance. But there was something else in the letter, something that sent a chill down her spine. "I must warn you," the letter continued. "This wedding will be unlike any you have attended before. It is not just a celebration of love, but of something deeper. I hope you will come, and I hope you will understand." The letter was signed simply Tariq. Layla sat back in her chair, stunned. Her mind raced with 1,000 questions. Was this some sort of cruel joke? Or had he really moved on, gotten married, and forgotten everything they had shared? And why had he chosen now to reach out? The unanswered questions gnawed at her, and she could feel the weight of his invitation hanging over her like a dark cloud. But there was something else, something that made her hesitate. Despite the pain he had caused her, Layla knew she could not ignore this invitation. She had to know why he had disappeared. She had to understand what had happened all those years ago. And so, with a mixture of curiosity and trepidation, Layla made up her mind. She would go. The wedding was to take place in a luxurious villa in the hills of Dubai, a place she had once dreamed of visiting with Tariq. The location seemed almost surreal, a world away from her life in Nairobi. She had always imagined that if she and Tariq ever reunited, it would be in a place like this, somewhere grand, beautiful, and filled with the promise of a new beginning. But this invitation felt different, felt like a trap. Layla's heart raced as she booked her flight to Dubai, her mind filled with conflicting emotions. She had no idea what awaited her, but one thing was certain. This would not be an ordinary wedding. It was clear that Tariq had a plan, one that involved more than just a celebration of love. And she had no choice but to find out what it was. The flight to Dubai was long, But Layla's mind raced the entire time. Every possible scenario played out in her head, each more perplexing than the last. What had Tariq been planning all these years? What kind of wedding was it that required an invitation from him after so many years of silence? The mere thought of him filled her with a complicated mix of longing, resentment, and curiosity. But she knew one thing for sure. She had to go. When Layla landed in Dubai, the heat of the desert air greeted her, the sun hanging low in the sky like a golden coin in the vast blue expanse. It was as if the city itself pulsed with life, a stunning contrast to the emotional turmoil churning inside her. She had been here once before on a brief vacation with Tariq. They had spent days exploring the city, shopping in the high-end malls, enjoying the grand views from the Burj Khalifa. The memories came flooding back with a painful clarity. Now, as she stood in the bustling airport, she could almost feel him there beside her, his arm around her waist, his smile as bright as ever. But it was all in the past, and she had to remind herself of that. The driver who had been arranged to pick her up was a tall, well-dressed man, his dark sunglasses reflecting the sharp rays of the sun. He greeted her with a slight bow and a courteous smile, but his eyes betrayed nothing. Layla settled into the back of the luxury car, her stomach in knots as the vehicle drove through the streets of Dubai. Skyscrapers towered on either side of her, their glass windows glinting in the sun. The city was as glamorous as she had remembered, but it felt cold now, empty, almost. It took over an hour to reach the villa, and as the car turned into the gated driveway, Layla felt a sense of unease settling over her. The villa was magnificent, a sprawling palace made of marble and glass, with fountains cascading down stone steps into pools of turquoise water. The grandeur of the place took her breath away, but it also made her feel small, insignificant. This was a world she had never truly belonged to, no matter how much Tariq had tried to pull her into it. The moment she stepped out of the car, she was greeted by an elegant woman in a long, flowing dress. Her hair was dark and glossy, her features sharp and striking. She extended a hand to Layla, her smile polite but distant. "Welcome, Layla," the woman said in a soft, accented voice. "I am Rania, Tariq's fiancé. He is expecting you." Fiancé. The word stung more than Layla had anticipated. She had expected to feel jealous, perhaps, but hearing it spoken aloud, hearing the woman's calm assurance, cut deeper than anything she had experienced in years. But there was something in Rania's eyes that made Layla pause, something faintly uncertain, as though the woman was hiding something. Rania led her inside the villa, where the soft sounds of classical music drifted through the air. The space was opulent. Every surface gleamed. Every piece of furniture seemed chosen with meticulous care. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceilings, their lights reflecting off marble floors that sparkled like polished jewels. But Layla felt out of place in such a setting. It was too much, too perfect, too cold. As they walked through the villa, Layla could not help but notice the absence of people. There were no guests milling about, no laughter, no chatter. It was as though the place had been prepared for something more than a mere wedding. The walls were adorned with photographs, pictures of Tariq and Rania together, smiling at each other with a sense of intimacy that felt foreign to Layla. She could not help but stare at the images, her eyes scanning every detail, looking for something, anything, that would explain the strange feeling that had settled in her chest. Rania led her to a large sitting room at the back of the villa, where a group of staff members were preparing refreshments. Layla was offered a seat, but she declined, her nerves on edge. She was about to speak when the sound of footsteps interrupted her. The door swung open, and there he was, Tariq. Layla's heart skipped a beat at the sight of him. Time had done little to change him. He was still as handsome as ever, his dark eyes holding the same intensity that had captivated her years ago. He wore a sharp suit, his expression serious but with a glimmer of something else, a hidden knowledge, perhaps. He stepped into the room, his gaze locking with hers, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick with tension. "Tariq?" Layla's voice faltered, her heart racing. "I did not expect this." Tariq's lips curled into a small, almost unreadable smile. I know, Layla. It has been a long time, but I felt you deserved to be here, to witness this moment. Her brow furrowed in confusion. Witness what? Why did you invite me? After everything that happened between us. Why now? Tariq's eyes darkened slightly. You were a part of my life once, and I never forgot you. There are things you do not know, things you will understand once the ceremony begins. Layla stared at him, searching his face for any sign of emotion. But he was as calm as ever, his demeanor unreadable. His words did nothing to ease her anxiety. Instead, they deepened her confusion. What was he trying to say? What had happened during the years they had been apart? Before she could ask anything further, Rania interjected. We should let you settle in, Layla. The wedding will begin soon. Tariq gave a slight nod, his eyes lingering on Layla for a moment longer before he turned and walked out of the room, leaving her alone with Rania. Layla was about to speak, but Rania raised a hand, silencing her. Tariq has a plan, she said quietly, her tone suddenly serious. A plan that involves both of us. Layla blinked in surprise. What do you mean? What is going on here? Rania's expression remained unreadable, but her eyes betrayed a hint of anxiety. You will understand soon enough, but be prepared, Layla. Tariq does not do things without a reason. He has not brought you here for the wedding, not in the way you think. And with that cryptic warning, Rania turned and left the room, leaving Layla standing there, her mind whirling with more questions than ever before. The anticipation weighed heavily on Layla's chest as she stood in the grand foyer of the villa. The silence that hung in the air was unnerving. She felt as though the entire villa had become a stage for a play, and she was the unsuspecting audience member, caught in the middle of a performance she did not understand. Her thoughts raced, each one more frantic than the last. What was Tariq planning? What had Rania meant when she spoke about a plan that involved both of them? The words haunted her as she tried to steady her breath. There was no way she was going to simply be a passive observer in whatever twisted game Tariq had devised. She had to confront him. She needed answers. Layla turned on her heel, determined to find him. But as she walked through the villa's marble halls, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She had no idea what she was walking into, but she knew she had to face it head-on. Her journey led her outside to the expansive garden that surrounded the villa. The sounds of the water fountains echoed softly, a stark contrast to the thudding of her heart. The space was beautifully designed, with manicured hedges and colorful flowers lining the paths. But there was no beauty in the moment for Layla. She was drowning in confusion, in doubt, in fear of what was coming next. That was when she saw them, Tariq and Rania, standing by a small stone bridge that crossed over a shimmering pond. They were talking, but Layla couldn't hear the words from where she stood. As she stepped closer, she caught a glimpse of the intensity in their expressions, the way they leaned into each other, whispering softly. She hesitated, her heart skipping a beat. What was going on? Before she could approach, Tariq turned, his gaze catching hers. There was something different about him now. His earlier calm demeanor had transformed into something sharper, more purposeful. Layla froze as he began walking toward her, his every step deliberate. Layla, he said when he reached her, his voice carrying a weight she hadn't heard before. I hope you are not feeling uncomfortable. You must understand, this is not what it appears to be. Layla's eyes narrowed. What is going on, Tariq? I need you to explain. I came here because you asked me to, but you have not given me a single real answer. What is this plan? What is this wedding truly about? Tariq studied her for a moment, his face unreadable. I know you have questions. You deserve to have them answered. But you need to understand one thing first. I did not bring you here for a wedding. I brought you here for something far more important. Layla's stomach twisted. What are you talking about? Tariq glanced over his shoulder at Rania, who had stayed behind, watching from a distance. She seemed distant, her posture rigid. Layla followed his gaze and saw the coldness in Rania's eyes, almost as if she were waiting for something to unfold. It was a look Layla had never expected from her. The truth is, Layla, Tariq began, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. This is not a wedding. It is a gathering to settle old debts, to right the wrongs that have been left unresolved. Layla blinked, trying to process what he was saying. Old debts? What does that have to do with me? Tariq's lips tightened. You see, there were things that happened between us, things that you did not know about. When I left you all those years ago, it was not because I did not care. It was because I was forced to. I was put in a situation that threatened not only my life, but yours as well. Layla's mind spun. The betrayal she had felt when Tariq left her without explanation had been devastating. But hearing him speak of threats, of danger, shattered the image she had held of their love. What are you saying? Why didn't you tell me? I couldn't. I had no choice. I was in too deep, Layla. My family's business, the things they were involved in, put me in a position where I had to leave you to keep you safe. And now, after all this time, I have come back to face what I left behind. And to finally make amends. Layla took a step back, her heart racing. Amends? Tariq, you disappeared without a word. You left me in the dark. How can you talk about making amends now? Tariq's face softened. I know it was wrong. But I have spent the last few years building up the life I needed to protect you and everyone I care about. This wedding, this gathering, it is not just about a new chapter for me. It is about confronting the past. And there is only one way to do that. Before Layla could speak, Rania stepped forward, her eyes cold and distant as she spoke. You may not understand yet, Layla, but everything Tariq is saying is true. This is bigger than any of us. We were forced to make difficult choices. And now, we are here to face the consequences. Layla's mind raced. Consequences? For what? Tariq's gaze hardened. For the things my family was involved in. The deals that went wrong. The enemies we made. And the price that had to be paid. He paused. You were never supposed to be a part of this world, Layla. But your connection to me made you a target. And now, I must protect you in a way that you never imagined. Rania's voice cut through the air. The wedding is only a distraction. The true reason we are here is to settle a score that has been hanging over us for years. The words hung in the air, thick with tension. Layla's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to comprehend the magnitude of what she was hearing. This was no ordinary wedding. This was a confrontation, a reckoning for a past full of secrets, lies, and threats. And it seemed that she was caught in the middle of it all. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed behind her, and Layla turned to see a group of men approaching. Their faces shadowed, their expressions grim. They were dressed in dark suits, and the air around them was filled with a sense of menace. It was clear that this was not a gathering for celebration, but one for something far darker. Tariq stepped forward, his demeanor now steely. It is time. Layla looked between him and Rania, her mind racing. This was not the reunion she had imagined. This was not the wedding she had been invited to. It was something much more dangerous, and Layla realized that her past with Tariq was far more tangled than she had ever imagined. As the men moved into position, Layla realized that this moment, this gathering, was only the beginning. And whatever happened next would change everything. Layla's heart raced as she stood there, the ominous group of men approaching, her mind struggling to catch up with the storm of emotions swirling inside her. Everything that Tariq had just revealed, the truth about his family's dangerous business, the lies, and the risks he had taken to protect her, all seemed like too much to process. Rania, now standing beside Tariq, seemed to be awaiting something. Her composure had cracked for a moment earlier, but now, she stood tall and calm again, her face devoid of any emotion. The tension in the air was palpable, and Layla knew that whatever Tariq had brought her here for was not just a reunion. It was something much darker. Tariq, what is going on? What are these men here for? Layla asked, her voice trembling but determined. Tariq turned to face her, his expression hardening. They are here to settle the debts from the past. My family's past. It was never just about money or power, Layla. There were deals made, bloodshed, and people who paid the price. You were always supposed to be kept away from this world, but now... He took a deep breath, as if weighing his next words carefully. Now, I have to face the consequences of the choices I made, and I cannot let it go any longer. Layla shook her head in disbelief. So you brought me here to… What? Watch you fix the mess your family created? I never wanted any of this. You disappeared without a word. Tariq. You left me thinking I was nothing, that I was just a chapter you were done with. Tariq's jaw clenched, his eyes filled with remorse. I never stopped thinking about you, Layla. Every day I regretted leaving you. But I had no choice. I couldn't let you get involved in the danger that followed me. I tried to build a life to protect you from all of this. But I see now that I was wrong, that I hurt you more by disappearing. For a long moment, Layla didn't know how to respond. She had loved him with all her heart, and his sudden departure had devastated her. But now, hearing him speak of the years he had spent in this shadowy world, trying to protect her, confused her even more. Was it truly about protection? Or had he just abandoned her when things got tough? Do you think I can forgive you for that? Layla asked quietly, her voice breaking. Do you think this is going to fix everything? I don't know if I even know who you are anymore. Tariq reached for her hand, his eyes pleading. I don't expect forgiveness, Layla. I just want you to understand why I did what I did. I want you to see that, despite everything, I never stopped caring about you. You were always the most important thing in my life. Layla pulled her hand away, her heart aching but also angry. I don't know if I can even believe you anymore. Everything about this life you've led, I don't recognize it. I don't recognize you. Before they could say anything more, one of the men, tall with a dark scar across his cheek, stepped forward, his voice low and threatening. Enough of this emotional nonsense. Tariq, we are here for business. If you do not settle this tonight, we will make sure there are no more second chances. Tariq's expression hardened, the calm mask he had been wearing now slipping into something darker. This is not how it ends. I will settle this on my own terms. Tonight ends everything. Layla's chest tightened as she watched the exchange. What was happening? What kind of dangerous world had Tariq been a part of all these years? Rania stepped forward then, her voice cold. Tariq, you cannot change the past. You know this. She turned to Layla, her eyes meeting hers with a rare vulnerability. I do not want to be here any more than you do, but we are all tied to this legacy now. You are too, Layla. Layla felt as if the ground beneath her was shifting. She was not just a bystander in this world. She had been part of it all along, even when she had no idea. And the truth hung in the air like a heavy fog, waiting to engulf them all. With no more words, Tariq turned to the group of men, his voice commanding. Let's finish this. The men moved into position, and Layla's pulse quickened. Whatever this was, she was no longer an outsider. She had become part of something much darker than she ever imagined. But as the tension peaked, Layla realized something. It was not just the business deals, the debts, or the dangerous men that had kept her in this place. It was Tariq. And whatever this final confrontation was, it would decide everything, whether she walked away from him forever or chose to stay, even with all the risks. Suddenly, the sound of a phone ringing cut through the air, sharp and urgent. One of the men reached into his pocket and answered. He listened for a few moments, his face hardening, before speaking into the phone. Understood. He looked at Tariq. The deal is off. Your family's debts have been erased. The payment is complete. For a long moment, no one spoke. The air seemed to freeze. Layla watched as the weight of the moment settled over Tariq. He had done it. He had settled the past. But at what cost? Tariq turned to Layla, his expression now a mixture of relief and exhaustion. It's over, he whispered. It's finally over. I can be free. Layla felt a strange mix of emotions. She was relieved, but her heart was still conflicted. Tariq was free, yes, but could she ever be free from the shadow of his past? Could she trust him again after all the years of silence? As the men left without another word, Layla remained standing, staring at Tariq. The villa, the wedding, the debts. All of it seemed like a dream now, fading into the distance. The reality was that they had survived. But their future, their story, was yet to be written. Tariq took a step toward her, his eyes filled with hope. Layla, I know it will take time, but I want to try. I want us to try. If you're willing. She took a deep breath, her heart still heavy with questions. But for the first time in years, she felt like she had a choice. A chance. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, she said softly, but I'm willing to find out. The two of them stood there in the quiet night, knowing that the future was uncertain. But for the first time, they had the possibility of rebuilding, of finding peace in the ashes of their shared past.